The proposed tax reforms expected to overhaul Nigeria's revenue system have hit a significant hurdle. The National Economic Council, the country's highest economic advisory body, chaired by Shettima and comprising the 36 state governors, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria and other co-opted government officials, has asked the president to withdraw the tax reforms bill before the National Assembly for broader consultation. State House correspondent Adesua Moran reports.
Thursday's National Economic Council meeting, chaired by Vice President Kashim Shettima, put a pause to Nigeria's sweeping tax reforms bill due to the need for further consultations.
NEC noted the need for sufficient alignment between and amongst the stakeholders for the proposed reforms. So Council therefore recommend the need to withdraw the bill currently before the National Assembly on tax reforms so that we can have wider consultations and also build consensus around these reforms for the benefit of the entire country.
The Tinubu administration introduced these reform bills to the National Assembly as part of a broader effort to streamline Nigeria's tax system, establish a more equitable VAT distribution model based on consumption, and address long-standing disparities. Yet, the Northern Governors Forum, which represents 19 states, expresses concerns, urging lawmakers to ensure that the bill does not disadvantage northern states. The presidency, in response, stated that the reforms aim to streamline tax processes without marginalizing any area. Meanwhile, the council has declared the national flooding a national disaster, impacting over 1.3 million people and devastating farmlands, homes, and critical infrastructure. The Economic Council also recommended annual dredging of waterways and instructed the Ministry of Water Resources to conduct nationwide inspections on dam integrity.
There was serious emphasis on the need for a massive program of dredging or desilting of the waterways and have a firm program of continuous desilting almost on an annual basis of waterways. And then also it was observed that there are some critical parts of the country that are very massively ravaged by this flooding, particularly southeast, south-south, that are completely omitted in the ongoing programs.
Additionally, the Council reviewed the World Bank-supported initiative aimed at supporting displaced persons and their host communities, followed by a briefing on ongoing economic reforms and its impact.
As a result of the implementation of those measures, there's been a spike, an increase in the cost of living. And Mr. President's commitment was always to help the poor and the most vulnerable in particular, but the whole society in general. And those payments have been rolled out. We have reached 5 million households, 25 million Nigerians.
The government is under pressure from multiple fronts, from calls to rethink the proposed tax reforms bill for a fairer economy to urgent calls for flood recovery plans and support for displaced communities. With all eyes on these critical issues, Nigeria faces tough choices to stabilize and protect its citizens. From the presidential villa, Adesua Omoruan, Arise News.
Thank you, Adesua, for that report. Vimbai, issue, of course, that dominated headlines yesterday as well is around the tax reform bill transmitted, 4 executive bills transmitted to the National Assembly for consideration. And now, first of all, we heard the Northern Governors Forum, 19 states in all, say that they do not support that bill. And now it seems like they've gotten the buy-in of other governors who make up the National Economic Council, and they've advised the president to withdraw the bills. But I'm sure you've seen the statement made by the chairman of the Joint Tax Reform Committee, Mr. Taiwo Yedele, and also an explainer by the presidency through the spokesperson, the SA to the president on information and strategy, saying that it's supposed to be for the benefit of all and to ensure equity and fairness across. What's your take on this?
Well, excuse me, sorry, there's so many issues at play here, so I'll do my best to dissect them. I think one of the major things that was raised at the NEC meeting yesterday was the fact that there's a lot of misinformation and miscommunication surrounding this tax reform bill. So I think one of the most important things to do in the interim period, it's a good thing that it has been stopped, because a lot of communication needs to go out. When you go through the commentary, you find that people don't really, a lot of people aren't really understanding the issues on the ground. So I'll try and unpack it to the best of my ability. There are four major bills that have been proposed: the Nigeria Tax Bill 2024, Nigeria Tax Administration Bill, the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Bill. So that would change FIRS, Federal Inland Revenue Service, to being named the Nigerian Revenue Service, and the Joint Revenues Board. However, in all of this, what's really causing the hullabaloo is the issue of the derivation VAT tax model. Now, this is what has caused division between the North and the South. On tax issues, this wouldn't be the first time that we're seeing division between North-South lines. If you remember when there was the issue of implementing Sharia law on alcohol consumption, and where that alcohol revenue, the VAT from the revenue from the VAT, on alcohol consumption would be spent, there was a debate that, well, if some states feel that they are going to ban the consumption of alcohol, then they shouldn't benefit from the revenue of the sales of alcohol. So it's a similar conversation we're having. What does it mean when we're talking about an evolution in what the derivation tax model looks like? Well, in essence, they're saying that let's move from remitting VAT from remitting to where companies are headquartered or domiciled, and let's now make sure that the communities who consume the goods and services become the beneficiaries of the value-added tax. So what does that mean? That means that, well, if you produce a can of juice in one part of Ogun State and it's exported to Kano, if it is consumed in Kano, that means Kano will benefit from the value-added tax. Now, why are people kicking back? On the one side, I believe there are two schools of thought. One is the pro-fiscal federalism school of thought, which is saying that, well, each state should develop itself. This should be an opportunity and an incentive for states to create economic activity within themselves so that their citizens can be economically robust and be able to buy goods and services so that they can raise more VAT for their states. Now, the other side of the argument is saying, well, this is not fair. The other school of thought, I would say, is those who are in favor of centralization, or who are looking for a pan-Nigerian outlook on how VAT is shared. And they're saying that, well, that's not fair, because in our states, we don't have a lot of these, we don't have the scale of industrial and economic activity that's happening in other states. So it's not going to be fair. So there's so many ways to look at it, but ultimately the northern governors have kicked back and they said, this is not fair, this doesn't work for us, and it's lopsided. Well, on the other side, again, there's two ways to look at it. On the other side, the argument is that, well, boost your economies so that you can also enjoy the proceeds of VAT. Hold your leaders responsible on the subnational level, whether they be in the north or any part of the country. What are your governors doing? Your governors need to stimulate economic activities. Right. So many ways to look at this issue.
So there are so many ways to look at it, but let me take it from the point of view, first of all, to address consultation. Yes, the reason for them asking for the withdrawal of the bill is not, aside from the disagreement from the northern governors, is that, okay, we need to have more consultation, we need to ensure that people are a bit more aware and educated as to what the tax reform bill is about. But Mr. Taiwo Oyedele was appointed in July 2023. And since August, he and his team have worked in reviewing the redundancy of some of our tax policies, the multiple taxation, trying to streamline it. And consistently, he has been quite vocal. I mean, we know how expressive he's been. So I think in terms of awareness, the onus is on the government, on the subnationals now, who perhaps weren't paying attention during the process. And now that it's been transmitted to the National Assembly, realize that, oh my goodness, it's going to affect us adversely. So what were they doing in the period under review? I believe that Mr. Oyedele did his due diligence in trying to ensure that I've been at a number of meetings or events where he has given presentations about the new tax proposals, where he had talked about the benefits to Nigerians, and where he had highlighted that governors are going to oppose it. he had mentioned it and he had said that what he was hoping would make it work would be that the governors will accept it. And if you look at it, a lot of times when you bring up new policies or new reforms, the first thing that happens is distrust or just kick against it without looking at the merits of it. And thank you so much for explaining in detail so that Nigerians themselves can decide to make a decision on what is fair. What they're saying with the new tax reform is that it's going to be fairer, it's going to be more equitable, and it's going to be more efficient. It's going to take a lot of duplications that happen at federal, state, and local level to be harmonized. And that's what he was saying, that because when you're going to touch the revenue of the governors, they're going to complain. And what you said, spot on about, hopefully it would ginger these subnationals to be a bit more creative in terms of pushing consumption and not just waiting or sitting back and expecting revenue to come because of the fact that companies are headquartered headquartered in their countries without making efforts to actually boost revenue. So these are some of the conversations that are being had. I believe that the president, with this kind of pressure, would eventually probably capitulate and withdraw. But I'm hoping that at the end of the day, we are not cutting off our nose to spite our face for what would be a more efficient tax system. Mr. Oyedele and his team did a very thorough job, and I hope people will go and read in detail some of the recommendations from these reforms without just the headline around the derivation-based model. Any government should be excited about the derivation-based model for tax for VAT collection. So, let's see how this pans out. At the end of the day, the president will make the decision as to whether or not to withdraw the executive bill that's been transmitted, but the VP is the head of the National Economic Council, so that might very well be the case. But this is not by any means the end of this conversation. A lot of thoughts for and against, in support and against. So we'll definitely be taking this in the course of time.